Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by Rails to Trails Conservancy Trail Expert Network. I'm really excited for today's webinar. My name is Jesse Vornberg. I am the Trail Development Manager for the Western region based out of Oakland, California. Our topic for today is trail-oriented development, how trails create connected communities. So we can go to the next slide. Exciting news. We are now, or exciting for people who have AICP certification, we are now a certified credit provider. After this webinar, you can go ahead and go to do what you normally do, go to AICP's website and log this webinar for credit. And then we're going to launch a quick poll just to see how many people will be claiming credits today. And while you all fill that out, I will just start introduction. We have a really interesting topic today. This is actually one of our most registered webinars ever, kind of going back to COVID era numbers. And I think this really exhibits a strong desire for people to understand how to unleash the economic power of trails. That's really what a lot of today's topics are about. So trail-oriented development, you'll hear that TrOD as an acronym a lot today. That's a planning approach that integrates multi-use trails with residential and commercial development to create walkable, bike-friendly communities, enhancing mobility, promoting healthier lifestyles, and strengthening local economies. It's similar to transit-oriented development. TrOD clusters businesses, housing, and other amenities around trails to foster vibrant and connected communities. Head to the next slide. So we have a really great panel today. They'll take us through TrOD from starting with some guidelines out of Indiana to a project in its early stages in New Mexico, and last to a well-developed example in Washington, D.C. So our first speaker will be Jen Higginbotham, who oversees long-range planning at the Indianapolis MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization. Her team is responsible for the Central Indiana TrOD study. They might have even coined the acronym TrOD. And she'll get us started with an overview of the what, why, and how of TrOD. Then we'll move on to Jennifer Jackson, who's the Deputy Director at the Albuquerque Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency, where she manages the Albuquerque Rail Trail. When complete, that trail will link downtown Albuquerque with nearby neighborhoods on the 7-mile multi-use trail. And finally, Maura Brophy, who serves as the president and CEO of the NoMa Business Improvement District in Washington, D.C. This district is home to the Metropolitan Branch Line Trail, which helps make NoMa a thriving community and economy. All right, and with that, I will pass it off to Jen to do her presentation.
Thank you. As I was introduced, my name is Jen Higginbotham with the Indianapolis Metropolitan Planning Organization. Next slide. So we have created the Central Indiana Trail-Oriented Development Study. This was approved in March of 2024. Next slide. And I'm going to start off with what is TrOD and why do we call it TrOD next. So we came off of, as we were beginning this study, we were coming off of several years of doing transit-oriented development studies for the Indianapolis area. We were setting up for some bus rapid transit lines. So we've been using TOD for several years all over the place to every audience, and we just wanted to customize it a little bit. We threw the little R in there. I'm not going to say that we coined it. Somebody else might have been doing this already, but to call it TrOD was a little bit of a pun as well in the word that you use. So that's what I'm going to say throughout this presentation. You'll hear me say TrOD several times. So what is TrOD? Jesse gave us a good intro. It's basically mixed use development clustered around trails. It's compact, it's human scaled, it's walkable, it's designed for those trail users and connecting those locations. And it's also about creating vibrant places that have a lot of mobility options. Next. So why did we want to do this study? Some of the community benefits of TrOD, as Jesse mentioned, are things like having those mobility options, public health, both in uh, having physical activity, but also in reducing the emissions from automobiles by having shorter trips and trips that don't require a car, really boosting those local economies with that kind of compact development, and then the quality of life that they bring. Some of the regional benefits, the real reasons that the MPO in particular did this, if you're not familiar with MPOs, we are regional organizations that cover several communities. We receive federal funding. We're able to put that toward project funding for our local communities. And we also try to provide resources to those member jurisdictions beyond just that project funding. We want to give them ways to use data that we can provide for them and provide some of these studies so that they can use those to move forward. So this sort of a study, this TrOD study, also promotes sustainable and maintainable development. So sustainable is more that natural sustainability, maintainable meaning we're trying to create long-lasting, durable communities that are going to thrive, and then identifying some of those equity and implementation challenges that you sometimes get in these sorts of developments and being able to put those out there for people in advance, and then looking at some of our existing TrOD areas and then trying to inspire new ones and building on that success. Next. So first we did research. Next, I'm not going to dwell on this slide for too long, but I just wanted to mention that we did do a lot of community engagement. We had some great events that we did, both trail side. We had this giant map people could use. So we did talk to a lot of people during the course of this study. Next. And then we looked at some best practices. We wanted to wrap those in. So we looked at some trail projects and trail-oriented development projects going on in Charlotte, North Carolina, Atlanta, Minneapolis. Tennessee had a few emerging trail systems, so we wanted to look at how those were going and what they were incorporating. And then in central Indiana, we had 5 main examples of primarily rail trail, previous abandoned trail rail systems that became trail systems, and these exist in our area, and we wanted to look at those and the kind of development that had already been occurring on those trail systems. Next. So next, we created some typologies and guidelines. So for the typologies, we came up with 10 typologies for these TrOD areas to use as context and be able to see some, for each of the areas along those trails, to be able to see some of their self and their own context in these 10 typologies. They range from things like employment centers to town centers to high and low density neighborhood centers. We tried to cover a broad range of the types of things that you see along trail systems nationally. Next. For each one of these typologies, we created design guidelines. This one in particular is the innovation/maker place typology. We included 3 things for each of those typologies. We had some unique qualities. That was a list of bulleted items that we observed about those typologies. And then we had some contextual information. So you can see those photos in the upper right that are kind of showing the context of what you might expect in these areas. And then we created these visuals so that people could get an idea of what this typology could look like if it was actually applied on the ground. Next. We created 3 topic areas for the design guidelines. The first one was development. So that's really looking at the development types, the land use mix, the building and massing, the orientation, et cetera. Mobility and safety, that's looking at things like parking, bike share stations, repair stations, but also those crossings and how the trail users interact with, both pedestrians, bicyclists, cars, how everybody interacts. And then things like lighting and signage. And then comfort, that's really more about your experience while you're in the TrOD. So that's about your ability to use it. So things like seating and passive space, amenities like restrooms, but also your experience in terms of things like shade and having that present for you. Next. So then we looked at nodes. Next. We wanted to actually do some a bit more detailed, provide a bit more detailed information about what this could look like to somebody using this study. So in our region, we have 13 major trails. They include 234 miles on those trail systems. These are not all rail trails. Some of these are greenways, but these are the 13 major ones that we have in our area. Next. So we looked at we tried to identify some nodes that we could move forward with in the study. So we did that by identifying and scoring along those trail systems, things like activity, so that's population and employment, the growth happening, the walkability, bikeability, transit access, the potential for redevelopment in those areas. And then RAC is regional activity centers. That's a separate study that the NPO did prior so that we could identify where the most transportation activity is happening in our region. That's not just town centers and employment centers, but also major logistics hubs and things like that. So we have this regional activity center study. We wanted to see where those were also popping up along those trail systems. Next, so we were able to take all of those scores, put those little blue and green blobs on the map at right along those trail systems, and then we were able to narrow that down into 4 specific study areas that we moved forward with. So not all of so these 4 study areas that we chose, they weren't necessarily the highest scoring of those 7 factors that I just went through, where we scored all of the areas along the trails, but we wanted to include a range of rural, suburban, and urban as part of these examples, because as I said, this study really was meant to be something that helps show inspiration and helps people see themselves in this kind of development so that they can use it for those reasons. Next. So then we took those 4 nodes, we created these development concepts. I'm only going to go through one of them for time, but they are all included in the study on the website. So this one is in a town called Whitestown. It does have this little rural crossroads. It is a pretty small area in terms of this section of the community. They are building a little closer to the highway, but as far as their original town center, it is kind of a typical small country rural town layout. And if you go a little bit further outside of this picture, you're going to see a lot of crop fields, things like that. So looking at this next, we wanted to do some analysis on each of the nodes. So we looked at population highlights, like things about population, things about housing units. We have some employment job information for each one of these 4 nodes. We have a market inventory for each of these nodes. That this particular node for Whitestown is showing that currently it has industrial and retail, but we also had 2 more nodes that are on the other 3 where we identified if there was existing flex space or existing office space. And then we included information about market rents that were currently being captured in these areas. Next. So then I'm going to show the before photo again, just so that you have some context, and then we'll show the after photo. And the after photo is also giving you a land use mix for what we think could be in this area. So the future land use mix, you're looking at mixed use, commercial retail, a little bit of single family, and then some multifamily in this immediate node area. So this one in particular used the TrOD typology of the Main Street connector. And you can see where the existing buildings are. You can see where the conceptual buildings are. Again, this is not a planning study. This was not about figuring out where those things should go. This was about giving inspiration so that if they find themselves in a situation where they can do this kind of development along the trail in the future, they have these ideas in mind. Next. For each one of these concepts, we had some highlights and we noted those. So in this example, it's looking at focusing on that center of the Main Street. It's looking at some facade improvements. It's looking at activating frontages, maybe realigning the trail a little bit so that they can make room for infill, that kind of stuff. So each one of these 4 concepts has this type of an image. Next. It also includes a couple of eye-level perspectives. The one on the left is what it looks like currently. You can see what looks like maybe a road off to the right of that existing image. That's actually a parking lot. So in the image on the right, we're showing the trail being very enhanced with lighting and all of the people using it. And then we're showing a lot of infill buildings to either side of that trail. So they really focus in on that system. So again, inspiration images. Next. Next, and so we have a couple of strategies and toolkits that we included as well. So first, we talked about overcoming barriers. This is something that people ask a lot of questions about when they're doing projects. So we have some strategies for overcoming market barriers, environmental, regulatory, administrative, design, and social. All of those are things that we've seen different communities dealing with as they try to implement TrOD. We have promoting the nodal development. So as these trails go through these TrODs, they're going to become a bit more urban and walkable by nature, but we also want to preserve that natural trail experience. We want to make sure that they are focused activity centers, and we want to really make sure that we're looking at conflict management and safety. As you introduce more people walking and bicycling through these areas, you want to make sure that they're safe. Next. And then we also had some strategies for avoiding displacement, especially for underrepresented populations, marginalized populations. So we have some strategies in there about what to look for when you're starting to see potentially gentrification or new development happening, and how to make sure that you're on the front end of that and not the back end of it. And then we have some toolkits that we included for additional information about those best practices that I mentioned earlier, the market feasibility for each of those nodes that I mentioned. There's more information in those toolkits about that. And then we have some information about operations and management for TrOD systems, programming, and finance. Next. And then since we completed that TrOD study, we do have the report online. We've been going around to all of our communities, trying to make sure that they're aware of it, trying to help them understand if they have opportunities to apply it to something that might be happening in their community. And then we're potentially looking at some additional international case studies to include in the future. What are some of the health impacts of TrOD on communities? And then what are some other financing and funding structures that communities can use? So that concludes my presentation. Next slide has all my contact information on it, and you can find that study using the QR code or by going to indympo.gov/TrOD.
Thank you so much, Jen. I'd really encourage everyone to scan that QR code and take a look at the study in more detail. There's some really great information in there. And just a reminder, for Q&A, we will hold all questions at the end, but if you do have any questions for Jen, and you don't want to forget them, feel free to drop it in the Q&A box now. And so next we'll move on to Jennifer Jackson, who'll be talking about the Albuquerque Rail Trail. You're just on mute, Jennifer, but you can.
Sorry. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. My name's Jennifer. I am the Deputy Director at the Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency in the city of Albuquerque. So we are working on a trail project that's much earlier stage than what Central Indiana has going. So we're seeking to connect an existing trail through some historic communities that circle downtown Albuquerque. You can go to the next slide. So this is something that's been kind of in the planning stages, in the works for a number of years. Downtown Albuquerque for many years was dominated by our rail line. We have a rail line that runs north-south just to the east of downtown that is literally divided, physically separated some of our oldest, most historic communities. And this rail trail idea would not only connect these communities back together, but they would also build in green space and activate underutilized land in and next to the rail right-of-way. There's a lot of warehouses, vacant parcels, other things like that near here. So the hope is to incentivize new housing, new development around the area. And because these neighborhoods around downtown are so historic, and they all have kind of their own unique history, the idea is the trail would also uplift and celebrate this history. Next slide. So in the planning for the rail trail, we're thinking about each of these neighborhoods as being kind of an aura. So the art, the wayfinding, the landscaping would reflect and celebrate and lift up the heritage and the history of each of these neighborhoods that circles around downtown. Next slide. So some of the neighborhoods that are impacted are on this map. So the trail is in the teal kind of dotted line. On the kind of left-hand side of this image is an existing trail called the Bosque Trail, which runs along the Rio Grande through a forested area. And then the planned trail would be 5 miles that goes up in through town and connect back on the north and south sides to this existing Bosque Trail, which is a very popular amenity. Next slide. So like Indiana, we have been looking at a number of trails around the country. We're really looking at the Indianapolis Cultural Trail because that's a very comparable example to what we're trying to do here, a trail that goes through kind of the heart of downtown and connects neighborhoods and connects amenities and helps foster new development, new investment, new small businesses. So we're also looking at Atlanta, Chicago, Memphis, New York Highline, and we've also been talking with Tucson and some of their trail oriented developments they're doing down there. Next slide. So this is a rendering. I'm just going to show some renderings of what we're thinking this will look like. So it will bring in a lot of landscaping, green space. Currently, Albuquerque's downtown has very, very little green space. Only 3% of the land area of the downtown core is park space. So this would build a green belt that connects from the existing Bosque Trail up through these neighborhoods and bring in more greenery, native landscaping, or like Corandara gardens, local plants. We're hoping that the community could come and embrace that and support maintaining the landscaping along the trail as well. And because Albuquerque's downtown struggles where it's a heat island, we're in the Southwest, it gets very hot. Building in shade, building in more landscaping, more trees should help with that as well. Next slide. So this trail, for most of its length, will follow either active rail lines or disused rail beds. It will veer away from the trail, from the tracks at points, and it will connect to other transit infrastructure. So this is a rendering of our downtown transit center, which connects a lot of bus lines as well as a commuter train that goes south to a community called Berlin and north to our capital of Santa Fe. So we're really envisioning this trail as not something that's just nice for recreation, but something that will really help connect people to places near and far. So about 50% of downtown residents don't have regular access to a vehicle. So this really could be a huge thing for people that don't have regular access to a car, not just to connect them to the recreational amenities that like the Bosque Trail or the larger bike network, but also to the larger transit network. Next slide. So we're planning this in stages, and there's one segment that's actually broken ground, is under construction. It's in an area called the Sawmill neighborhood, which literally used to have a sawmill. And there's a disused rail spur that comes up to it that used to carry the wood away to the main train line. So these are some renderings of the Sawmill segment. So we are working on a small segment of this right now, and then we're fundraising to build out the rest of the segment. So what's interesting about this area is that it is Albuquerque's only functioning community land trust. So it is a low income minority majority neighborhood that also has a lot of hotels and a very popular food hall in the area. So traffic congestion has become a huge problem with visitors coming for the hotels and the food hall. So the neighborhood has been very excited about the opportunity of this trail to help encourage people to come in through using other modes, not driving in, but biking in, and also for the residents who live in this neighborhood to get out to other communities nearby, to other neighborhoods nearby, because right now they're pretty physically separated by a couple of major roads from the areas around them. Next slide. The other piece of this that is about to break ground, I think the work's actually going to start in a couple of days, is we have a stretch of the old Route 66, it's now called Central Avenue, that runs right through the downtown core. And the way it was designed was the tracks go on a elevated bridge and the road goes underneath. And historically, the pedestrian passing has been two narrow tunnels that go under the tracks. And the tunnels are dark and unpleasant and attract loitering and feel dangerous. And so for a number of mayoral administrations now, we've been trying to figure out what to do about this crossing because it literally is the gateway, the entry point into downtown. And it's really unpleasant, and it really makes the neighborhoods on either side of the tracks feel very disconnected from each other, even though they're physically close. So one of the projects that we're working on that will connect to the rail trail is what we're calling Central Crossing, which would take away those subterranean tunnels and replace them with a ramp that goes up and over the tracks. So there'll be a ramp that connects the transit center to up over and then to a neighborhood on the other side called East Downtown. It's not shown on this, but there's a very popular hotel in East Downtown that a lot of people downtown stay in. But the way to get into downtown is pretty unpleasant. And then at the top, will feature a monumental sculpture that we're hoping is a real gathering point and a real, real traction point to mark like the entry into downtown. Next slide shows something of a rendering. So this was originally conceived as a tumbleweed. It's gotten a little bit more abstract over time, but it will be on the bridge that people will bike through this giant 30-foot tall light up sphere that we're hoping will really embrace our like Route 66 neon focused heritage and also be this really interesting focal point and fun thing for people to bike through. Next slide. So in preparation for this, as we're planning and starting to construct, we did pass some small area amendments to our zoning code. So along the lines of what Indiana was doing, thinking about how do we prepare for future development along the trail. So we're trying to get ahead of it with these updates. So this would mandate a certain level of outdoor seating, building height setbacks that are right up to the trail, landscaping buffers. The parking should not be trail facing, and there should be gate access off of any sidewalks or building access onto the trail. So, so we're really hoping that developers will naturally want to build trail-oriented development buildings that really like have a lot of like activity and focus that are, like orients towards the trail, not the street. But in order to enshrine that, we've also passed these small area amendments. We're also working on with the planning department an anti-displacement toolkit, and we put together last year an inclusive growth report, and that's really just looking at the conditions in these areas and helping, because they are lower income neighborhoods, helping to get ahead of the concerns around gentrification and like rampant new development. Next slide. So the trail is partially funded. So we have a mix of local, state, and federal funds. As with all federal projects, the federal funding right now, we're not really sure what the status is, but we do have a mix of other funding sources. And so we're kind of, because we've conceived of the planning in neighborhood level segments, we're also fundraising in neighborhood level segments. So we can build each segment as we're able to like close those funding gap holes. And then each segment should have some independent utility for the residents and the visitors to those neighborhoods. And we're also working on helping some local stakeholders stand up a nonprofit friends group that we're hoping in the long run will help with fundraising. Next slide. Here's the different segments. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we are thinking about it in basically like 1 mile-ish segments. So we're planning and funding and trying to roll out construction piece by piece. Next slide. And we've engaged a lot of stakeholders over the years, local businesses, residents, property owners, the county, regional and state government entities, the feds, our chambers of commerce, and as I already mentioned, we're working on helping a core group of them stand up a nonprofit so that ownership of this trail will sit with the community and live longer, outlive any particular mayoral administration. Since this was a project that was kind of kickstarted by the city, we really don't want it to we want to make sure that it's like has long-term sustainability and long-term buy-in from the community that lives beyond the current mayor. And next slide. And this is my contact information. I know there's a lot of people on this call that have more experience or farther along than we are. Love to reach out. We're trying to learn from other communities so that we don't make the same mistake twice and that we can really keep this going without a hitch. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was really interesting. I really liked your solution for the central crossing. I think that's a very common thing with unpleasant tunnels under rail corridors. So look forward to seeing that finished product. And then our final presenter is Maura Brophy from NoMa Business Improvement District. Take it away, Maura.
Thanks, Jesse. And I want to say hello to everyone. Normally when I meet with groups like this, I ask people to raise their hands and say who's familiar with NoMa, but since I can't see people's hands, I will assume that some people are being introduced to the neighborhood for the first time, others are more familiar. But I'd invite anyone who has plans to visit DC to come pay us a visit. We always love to have visitors in the neighborhood. So as mentioned, I'm Maura Brophy. I'm the president of the NoMa Business Improvement District. I'm going to start by giving you an overview of the neighborhood of NoMa, which is a neighborhood in Northeast DC, and the organization, the BID, that takes care of the neighborhood and works as a champion of the neighborhood. Then I'm going to talk about the Metropolitan Branch Trail, which is a very heavily used, well-loved urban trail that runs through the neighborhood. And then I'm going to talk about the ways that the BID works to maintain and activate this trail. And I think that this portion of the presentation is intended to show what can happen on the other end of a lot of this planning and projects, and see how these trails can exist very successfully in urban neighborhoods. So next slide. And next slide. So to give an overview of the neighborhood, NoMa is in Northeast DC. We sit in the backyard of Washington's Union Station. So NoMa is the landing point for anyone who's arriving in DC on Amtrak. We are very well connected to other parts of the city and other parts of the region and country. We have 2 metro stations, lots of bus service, lots of protected bike lanes, and of course, this urban trail that I'll talk more about in a minute. There are 3 things that I like people to know about NoMa. One is NoMa is new. It's been developed only over the course of the past 20 years or so, mostly because of the infill metro station that has become the NoMa Gallaudet metro station. That coupled with some zoning changes and a tax abatement brought a lot of investment to this neighborhood starting around the early 2000s. The second thing that I like to tell people is not only is NoMa new, but NoMa is very successfully mixed use. I think when the original planning was done for the neighborhood, it was largely believed to become a kind of downtown adjacent new downtown with lots of office space. We do have office space, but we also have a lot of residential space, a lot of hotel space. And NoMa sort of serves as an example of what the post-pandemic downtown aspires to be, mixed use, vibrant. I like to tell people who are consumed with the crisis of the traditional central business district that we're not reinventing a wheel and that there are neighborhoods that look like this one that exist already that we can work to replicate. Next slide to talk a little bit more about the BID. BIDs by definition are special tax districts. And so property owners within the boundaries of BIDs pay a special tax, and that funds the work of the organization. The organization then provides services and programming that meet the neighborhood's needs. And it's no secret that that also is protecting property values for owners who are contributing into the BID and its funding. But there are lots of benefits for not only those owners, but also the people who live and work, visit the neighborhood. It's a model that has been around for a while now. The NoMa BID is one of 12 BIDs in DC, but these types of organizations exist in most cities in North America and also other parts of the world. So we were established in 2007, and our goal really is to make this neighborhood a place where people want to be, whether that's live, work, visit, play. We really work to make the neighborhood magnetic. And we do that by keeping the neighborhood as clean and safe as we can. Those are some of our core services. We provide business attraction and retention strategies. We activate the neighborhood through placemaking and events, public art. And our services and our programming is specifically designed to meet the needs of this neighborhood and the stakeholders who are here. So I'll advance to the next slide. I'm gonna, because I know that there are some people on the call that are less familiar with the neighborhood, I'm gonna show a quick video that will help to give you some visual understanding of what this neighborhood is. And then I will come back and I will talk more about the trail and the work that the BID does on it. But this will give you a good overview of NoMa and the type of neighborhood that I'm talking about.
Let's go.
20 years ago, a single metro station changed everything and helped put NoMa on the map. The NoMa Gallaudet U Metro Station, the nation's first ever infill station, closed the gap between Union Station and Rhode Island Ave and opened up an entirely new future. Fast forward to today. What was once an industrial warehouse district is now home to 15,000 plus residents, a daily hub for 60,000 plus workers, a thriving campus community for thousands of university students, with more on the way. And now, NoMa has arrived, a must-visit destination. Over the past 2 decades, NoMa has steadily evolved into one of DC's most dynamic and energetic neighborhoods. It's now home to a growing mix of hotels catering to visitors from around the world, a nationally recognized collection of public art woven into streets, trails, and underpasses, a one-of-a-kind urban park system that offers places to gather, rest, and recharge, an ever-expanding mix of restaurants, food halls, and independent local retailers, and a weekly farmers market that draws neighbors and office workers alike. Getting here is easy. Getting around is easier. In NoMa, connectivity is king. 3.2 miles of protected bike lanes, 15 bike share hubs, and scooter docking stations, a 2-mile stretch of the Metropolitan Branch Trail. It's not just about infrastructure. It's about lifestyle. It's about culture. It's about community. And thanks to the NoMa BID's care and creativity, it's also an outdoor movie theater, an open-air gallery, a pup paradise, and home to the legendary Metropolitan Beer Trail. The future is now. For 5 years running, the NoMa BID led the region in new apartment construction with 21 new multifamily buildings delivered, and the future keeps getting brighter. Georgetown University is expanding its capital campus into NoMa, ushering in new generations. The redevelopment of Union Station, located in NoMa's front yard, will transform and elevate the neighborhood into a dynamic gateway to the city. The long-awaited redevelopment of RFK Stadium, just 2.5 miles away, is moving forward, putting NoMa at the center of it all. NoMa isn't just growing, it's thriving. Clean, safe, creative, and constantly in motion. A neighborhood where life, work, and play meet on every corner.
So hopefully that helps bring some context to the next phase of the presentation, where I'm going to get into the trail, which is the Metropolitan Branch Trail. And the one more slide shows more details on what this trail is. As I mentioned, it is a very urban trail that runs through Northeast DC, but also into, basically it connects Union Station to Silver Spring, Maryland, which is an 8-mile stretch, and 2 of those miles are located in this neighborhood. It is a very important trail, not just for recreation, but also for transportation. It is definitely experiences a rush hour for commuters. It integrates the neighborhood that I'm in with neighborhoods around us very successfully, which is important because a lot of the road infrastructure in this neighborhood can be very difficult from a pedestrian and bicyclist standpoint. So we see a lot of people forego the traffic right-of-way altogether in favor of this trail that is much more comfortable, much faster, much more easy to navigate. It follows the right-of-way for Metro, which is our regional transit system, Amtrak, and commuter rail. Next slide. So for the BID's part in managing this 2-mile stretch, officially this trail is in the district's portfolio. We do not own the trail. It is Washington, D.C.'s DOT. It's in their jurisdiction. But the BID does a lot of work to maintain and activate the trail. The maintenance activities include light, mirror replacement, snow removal, graffiti removal. And the bid is reimbursed for some of this work through an agreement that we have with our local DOT. So there's a arrangement that allows us to do these activities on the district's behalf and get reimbursed for doing that work. So in addition to that maintenance work, the bid also activates the trail. And before I talk about what those activations are, there are a few images that I'll ask our moderators to just scroll through that help bring additional visual aids to the discussion. If you can advance to the next few slides. This is just intended to show you what this trail looks like on various stretches. And I'll ask to pause on this slide. This is Alethea Tanner Park, which is a park in the neighborhood. And I want to call attention to a couple of things as I transition to talk about activations. If you look closely, you can see a metro train passing by, and immediately in front of that is a wall with lots of color on it. Immediately in front of that wall is the trail. And the trail, this park sits on top of the trail. So we activate this park a lot. We happen to be kicking off an outdoor movie series tonight. So there'll be, we think, 1,000 people in this park watching Wicked come sunset. A lot of people will arrive to that event via the trail, whether that's them biking or walking there from a point proximate to the trail, or taking metro and then walking on the trail to get to the park. So again, we activate this park a lot, and that is very complementary. We see the trail as complementary to those activations, and also those activations are complementary to the trail. I want to zoom in a little. We'll advance to the next slide and talk about why that wall that I called attention to looks the way that it does. Next slide. We host an annual mural festival, and that is intended to bring color activation to the neighborhood. The legacy, the origin story is that this neighborhood, as it was being built, had a lot of construction, had a lot of vacant lots. And so the murals really helped to beautify the neighborhood and make it more interesting. So we put art up along this trail every year. Next slide shows some more visuals of that. People using the trail. The next slide has even more visuals. So that's one aspect of programming and activation. The last program that I'll talk about is the Metropolitan Beer Trail, which is DC's first and only ale trail. It takes advantage of the fact that proximate to this trail are 12 bars and breweries that are all walkable or bikeable from the trail. And so through a digital passport-based program, we sponsor the Metropolitan Beer Trail, which invites people to come out, check in at these establishments, earn points that can then be redeemed for prizes, which are shown on the next slide. So it's a gamified way to bring people out to these establishments, but also bring people out to the trail. And the next slide shows some of the metrics that we track that show the impact of this program. Last year, we had more than 12,000 people sign up for the program, and we had participants from 39 states and 38 countries. So we're thrilled to see that level of participation. It drove more than $1 million worth of sales to participating businesses, and it also gets a lot of people out on the trail, which we love to see. So if you happen to be visiting us anytime soon, we encourage you to check this out if you are able to come visit the neighborhood. Next slide shows, again, some people on the trail who are kind of doing the beer trail. They've got their shirts on. So it really is a nice way to bring people out, and we're very proud of the program that we put together. I'll end by just sharing contact information, ways to stay in touch about things happening in the neighborhood, and thank the Rails to Trails team for having me. I think that brings us to the end of the presentation, and Jesse, I'll turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Maura. Yeah, that was a great pitch for NoMa. I'm ready to move from Oakland cross country. But yeah, before we hop into Q&A, just want to provide a quick reminder for those of you who weren't on at the beginning, that you can now register for AICP credits if you are certified. And then, of course, I'd be remiss not to mention Rail to Trail Conservancy's TrailNation Summit coming up at the end of October 27th to 29th. Early bird registration is open until the end of this month. So if you are planning on coming, now is the time to register. We'll gather about 500 Trail Network practitioners from across the country for 2 days of mobile workshops, peer learning, networking, and relationship building. As part of the summit, we'll have tailored peer learning cohorts, providing a unique opportunity to connect with others working on similar challenges and share insights. So yeah, early bird registration closes at the end of the month. Okay, and then we did get quite a bit of questions, so apologies in advance if we don't get to yours. But first question for everyone, for all of our panelists, how have the surrounding communities, especially developers, reacted to TrOD? How have they bought in? And if so, do you have a top tool you recommend when having those discussions?
I can start. I have a really good example of how the development around the trail has acknowledged the trail's existence and taken advantage of it. As you can see, the neighborhood, and as you saw in the video, the land use behind me is the land use that we see throughout the neighborhood. So lots of high density multifamily projects, as well as office space. There are at least 3 multifamily buildings that sit directly next to the trail. So like basically on top of the trail. And the developers designed the building such that the units that are on the first floor of the buildings on the trail side have access points to the trail. We love this because it signals visibility on the trail. And those units also have access from the interior hallways. But I think it's such an amenity for someone who's active and trail minded to have the ability to have an apartment that allows them to pop right in and out of the trail. So that's one example that we've seen.
In Indianapolis, there are developers that are really picking up on, in particular, our Monon trail system. So that one's been around for a few decades now, and they're actually building to face the trail. So the homes that they're building along the trail are actually facing inward. We already have, as I mentioned, some trail-oriented development in certain areas that kind of grew up organically, or it's where the train went through sort of small town centers way back in history, and those areas are still kind of active. We haven't had a whole lot of focused trail development. We have had some out in the town of Speedway. So that's where, if you know the Indianapolis 500, that's a little town right around the Speedway. And they've really been renovating their town center and trying to connect to the B&O trail that goes out to the west side of our region. So that's one area where there's been a lot of interest.
Great, thank you. Next question, we got a few questions about anti-displacement and gentrification. So what kind of tools and policies have you created to address anti-displacement?
I can just say with the trail-oriented development study that I mentioned, I'm not going to cover everything. That's a big topic that you can see about 100 other webinars with 1,000 other tools. But in our document that we put together, we do include things like communication. So making sure that you're reaching out to those communities while you're doing this, the planning work, especially very early on, trying to make sure that you're celebrating those communities in the stuff that you propose, but also trying to make sure that you have partnerships and incentives for things like minority-owned businesses and local businesses that have been there forever. Are there some like taxing credits or some breaks or some grants that you can give to those businesses to make sure that they thrive, even during the development season of whatever you're going to be creating? Trying to come up with some affordable housing, or trying to make sure that you're sustaining the current affordable housing that you have in those areas. You're probably starting in an area that already has potentially lower value housing than maybe the rest of your city. And so what are some techniques that you can use? We list a few that are just kind of like maybe property tax freezes for seniors, things like that. But there are 1,000 techniques out there that are not covered in our study. So I suggest that, but also things like NoMa talked about their business improvement district. There's a lot of different tools out there that you can use to try to stave that off before you actually see it happening. You just have to think about it in advance, and that's kind of what our study focuses on.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, and I think we have some tools on our website as well. Maybe Isabel can drop those in the chat if they're easily accessible. Next is a very quick question for Jennifer. We had a couple people ask what tool you used for your renderings. People liked the renderings.
So it's a combination. So we use Antoine Predock Architect Anton Pruduk was an internationally renowned architect, but he's based in Albuquerque. So we're really using local talent to, on the extent that we can. So his architecture firm is still supporting some of the planning work, and also a local landscape planning firm called Planned, P-L-A-N-D, Planned. They have some regional offices, but they're mostly in the West.
Great, thank you. And then I think this is kind of for everyone, but curious about the building design considerations for TROD versus TOD. Are there differences or compared to other mixed use developments, and any zoning considerations or land use tools to address those differences or to make TrOD successful?
I'll just mention that I don't think there is a lot of difference. I mentioned that our MPO, we spent a lot of years on TOD in our region as we developed out some rapid transit corridors that included overlay district for the city of Indianapolis that we helped develop, and then have been trying to keep an eye on to make sure that it's working out the way that it was intended. It's very similar. So one of the reasons we put the study together was because in our region, we have one very large community with fixed transit, which is Indianapolis, and we have a lot of other smaller communities that do not have fixed transit. So what do they have? They have trail systems. So we're trying to develop ways that they can see the same advantages, but without having a fixed transit system, which is the driver in a lot of big cities.
Thanks, Jen. More, Jennifer, do you have anything else to add on that?
I'd agree. I mean, I think that this neighborhood is proof that rail infrastructure, trail infrastructure, especially rail, does not have to mean that you cannot have viable land use surrounding it. I mentioned the units that face the trail. Those units also face active rail right-of-way. There have been, some design decisions made about like noise mitigation. But I think that historically NoMa was rail adjacent land use that was industrial and low density and not as productive as it is now from an economic development standpoint. And I think it was historically believed that like you couldn't build stuff where people wouldn't live above train tracks. And I think that we've proven that that's not the case. And in fact, the access that the infrastructure can provide is a real amenity that people recognize and has an attractive quality.
Just want to jump in, and you had an earlier anti-displacement question too, so this kind of ties in. So because we're in the early stages, there really hasn't been like new development happening. We've heard of developers wanting to build, but they want to see the trail start first. But because our trail will go through a number of historic lower income minority neighborhoods, we have been having a lot of conversations over the past few years about like helping them understand what this could mean for them, and what could help keep people in those communities. Albuquerque right now has, I think a lot of cities across the country, a huge housing shortage. We're about 30,000 units short of a healthy housing market. And a lot of these neighborhoods are losing population. Outside investors are coming in, buying up small homes. So like helping these neighborhoods, the residents of these neighborhoods understand that in order to like stave off displacement, we really do need to build. We need to build more, we need to build dense. 33% of the downtown core's footprint is surface parking lots. That's kind of ridiculous. So in order to help people stay in their communities, we need to build, and we need to build up. So it's just navigating this like fear of change, fear of changing the character of the neighborhood, and also like helping them understand that if you don't build, you're gonna make cost of living more and more expensive for people that are there, and you're gonna keep driving people away. So it's been a lot of back and forth, and it's just gonna continue.
Yeah, I think this topic is such a great example of how big the intersection between housing and trails, transportation more broadly is. Okay, so we got a question about for Jennifer specifically, but maybe Maura and Jen have things to add to this, but speak a bit to your negotiations with BNSF. How did the city and BNSF come to an agreement on the trail? I know this is probably a much longer answer, but maybe you can give us a quick summary on that.
So piece by piece, so we don't have like full agreement for every piece of the trail yet. So it's actually this layers of bureaucracy because a portion of the trail has federal funding on it. So we have US DOT, FHWA, we have state DOT, the state DOT Rail Bureau, we have regional government stakeholders, and we have BNSF. So BNSF actually is not the most challenging to work with. The real slowdown has been at the state level. And all of the federal money flows through the state. So the federal dollars are like negotiated through the state. So there's been years of meetings. And really like what has helped get some forward momentum, particularly around that central crossing, which is a big, old, complicated bridge. It's structurally complicated. It includes all of these stakeholders, has been really just looking segment by segment, like what do you need from us on this little piece? What do you need from us on this little piece? So taking those preliminary plans and walking like foot by foot and just like getting agreement and then getting it in writing and then coming back and saying, is this still okay? And so just really that there's a lot of trust building, a lot of meetings. The other thing we started to do is just like when possible, meet face to face. Felt like Zoom, it was just like, it wasn't getting us anywhere. We were having endless Zoom meetings, and then we had called it a summit last winter, and that seemed to like a little bit break the logjam. There's still a lot of negotiations to go, though. It's challenging, but BNSF has not been the most challenging one. So they will come in. They come in at about 90% design, I believe, and just approve like, yes, this will work with us, this won't. But before that, it's kind of going through the NMDOT and the State Rail Bureau, like that's housed within the DOT. But their motivations are, you know, safety and profit, and so we can wrap our heads around that. When there's other holdups at the federal or state level, that can be a little bit harder because it's like trying to get out of them, like, okay, what's the holdup here for you? So it's just been a lot of talking, a lot of meeting.
Right. Thank you, Jennifer. And unfortunately, we have a lot more questions we were not getting to, but we're unfortunately out of time. So big thank you to Jennifer, Jen, and Maura for being here today and discussing their projects. And thank you to everyone who came. Reminder to stay tuned for future webinars if you enjoyed this one. Get on our mailing list so you can know when they're coming. And don't forget that you can now get AICP credits with our events. So thank you again.